Hello world! I've reached the limited capacity for video storage, which can only mean one thing. It is time for an update video on my little backyard railway. As you can see here, I have refined the process of milling ties. I still cut them to the same shape, and I'm still drilling a little hole, but there is a small variation change in that this hole is now a tiny bit bigger than it used to be. I used to size it perfectly to those little nibs in the rail, and now I no longer do that. And when I line up all these ties, I strike a single line on one half of the tie versus a little point where I'm going to drill the hole. This single line helps me if I have to move drilling a hole slightly to meet those little nibs because they don't always line up on the railway. And they're going to help out on turns because I plan on cutting a notch in one half of the tie when doing turns from now on. Because the only turn I've actually put in the railway thus far is going to need to be redone. It's completely out of gauge. I actually like that the rails need to rest inside these holes because it helps a lot with track gauging, but I'm not using these holes specifically to gauge the track. I use an actual master tie that slots into the rail and it gauges my track for me so that my track is more in line, but these holes do help a lot with making certain I'm in the ballpark area when putting the rail down. I've gotten into the habit of spending a single day just milling as many of these ties as I can. I actually like that they're nice thick 2x4s. They fit perfectly beneath the rail, and I know that there's a lot of chunky wood there so that even if they start to rot, they'll still be strong enough to hold the track a little bit. Moving on to the next interesting thing, I have stopped using fish plates to bolt together the rails. It's just so hard to drill through this T-post, and I finally figured out why. I took a small piece of this T-post to my buddy, and he gave it a little scratch with his testing tool, and he told me that it is hardened steel. It must have been hardened by the fact that it's recycled railway track. An entire train has been on top of this at one point, and then it went through some kind of process to stretch it out into this T-post. It's super hard stuff, and it can break drill bits. So my options are to invest in a drill press and a really expensive drill pit, or I could spend even more money and learn a new skill entirely, and that skill is welding. From now on, I'm going to weld these pieces together, which is why I've got the angle grinder out. I'm grinding out all of the paint that is stuck on these T-posts, and I'm going to go ahead and flatten out the metal surfaces and make them suitable for a welding project. Now, if you take a look at the ends of these T-posts, they're pretty gnarly. I've seen how these T-posts are made. There's some kind of big scissor machine that just cuts these things off of each other, one after another, with a big chomper. And it makes a pretty gnarly edge, and then they dip the whole thing in paint. So it's really not suitable to put fish plates on these and expect perfect lineup anyway. This grinding is something you'll have to do regardless. And I'll tell you right now, it's easier to weld these things together than it is to bolt these things. And as for strength, you can't really get a whole lot of strength out of the fish plate bolt connection to begin with. I would say, in my amateur opinion, that a bad weld is equal to the best bolting you could possibly do. So it's going to be worth it to me to go ahead and weld all these joints. So here I am, welding track pieces together. I will say, this is not the first section I've welded together, and some of my first welding jobs I refuse to show on the internet, because they were awful. But I'm getting exponentially better, and it's amazing how much welding is a kind of art rather than a science. You just kind of have to know what to do and go by feel when you're putting it all in there, and no two welds are completely alike. The materials tend to just change slightly. There might be a little bit more paint on them, giving me a little bit of trouble, and I don't know how to describe it, but I am getting exponentially better and I'm really enjoying doing it. For anyone who is watching this who's maybe a seasoned welder, feel free to go down to the comments below and light me up on how bad my welds are and things I can do to improve my technique. Of course, your comments are always welcome. Now this second joint I decided to do a little bit of an experiment on. What I wanted to try and understand if it was better for me to cut the rail pieces level, butt them up and then join them together with two solid welds, or if I could get away with filling a little gap hole with some of the little pieces of rail that I have from cutting these pieces up off straight. And what I realized is that the less joint you have, the better. So if I could go ahead and redo this in the future and get rid of this little gapper piece, I would definitely do so. In fact, I kind of want to refit out my workbench for some kind of welding jig in which I can permanently fuse two 8-piece sections of rail into a perfect 16-foot section of rail. That way I can really buff down that one dividing weld so that it's practically seamless, and then have only the sloppy welds where I'm sitting on the ground every 16 feet instead of 8 feet. The longer a continuous piece of track I can get, the happier I'll be in the long run. So I won't be doing a setup jig like this again. It turned up really sloppy, and I bet I'm going to feel it in my butt every time I go over it with the train. Another bonus to learning how to weld is it's finally time for me to start working on my rolling stock seriously. As my entire setup gets further and further away from my house, I'm going to have to put everything on a flatbed and drag it with me while I'm working on the track. That includes my welder and everything like that. So I'll need a flatbed car, and for that I'm going to need those bogies to actually be functional. So it's time to weld something up together to hold them steady and attach them to the flatbed. It is by no means the best welding job in the world, but it should hold well enough for my purposes, and I'm making sure all the weight is not trying to separate the weld, but is instead just sitting on top of the metal. It should hold together for long enough, and if it breaks, I'll just fix it in the future. After I was all done welding, it was time for me to drill the holes for ball hitches onto these little bogies. That's how I'm going to attach the flatbed onto the bogie itself and have it go down the rails. I don't have good experience with drilling holes. Usually each hole costs 1 drill bit, but this metal is much softer than the T-post metal, so I can actually get through it.
Yep.
After I drill the holes, it's just a matter of putting on the ball hitches. These ball hitches shafts are different sizes, but the ball itself is the same size. I've been picking them up wherever I can cheaply, not necessarily getting them all to be the exact same shape and size, but they still all attach the same, so that's what matters. As we continue on to the last part of the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me in my eternal war against the YouTube algorithm. And of course, it supports me in doing more dumb stuff like this, like building little railways. If you want to see future content involving trains and train-related things, the best way to support me in doing so is to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with other people that share that interest. Thank you very much for watching, and let's continue to the last part of the video. As you can see, my bogies don't have any sort of buffer system yet, and they also don't have any sort of coupling system. So far, they're just designed to attach to the bottom of flatbeds, and in fact, they're all designed to be the middle bogie of a flatbed, attaching right between two flatbeds as they join together. I plan on also designing them to have a coupling system so they can attach to the back of an engine, or perhaps attach to another piece of rolling stock, but that's all going to be in the future. I'll figure that out as we go along. And just like that, this update video is over. My neighbor took down their fence, by the way. They're rebuilding that. That's kind of cool. My railway track is getting so long that I'm going to have to start building rolling stock to facilitate its construction, and everything's coming along smoothly. Can't wait to finish it. Thank you very much for watching, and for now I'm going to have to say, bye-bye!